I'm okay. I'm totally fine.
Hello everybody and welcome back to Topic Tuesday. Today's topic is a basic introduction to colouring. Now, to be honest, colouring is a very broad topic. I can talk about colour theory, lighting, styles, most of which I am very limited in skill myself, but I am continuing to improve on. But knowing the theory and putting them into practice can be difficult sometimes. I do my colouring in layers, each colour having its own. And when it comes to shading, you can lock the opacity so you can only work on the colour itself, painting over it. Or you can create a new layer and link that layer to the colour layer so you are doing it in separate and it's easier to edit. I do it both ways depending on my mood and what I'm working on. So for this I'm just going to do a basic how I colour, so hopefully you can take something from it. But for the moment, enjoy watching me draw the line art for this project. You've probably heard the expression flat colour. It basically means the first layer, no shading, no highlights, no lighting, just the base colour of everything. Looks kind of boring when it's done. It's good to have a palette of colours prepared, but if you don't or are colouring fan art, you can Google search images and use the colour picker on the program that you're using, if you're using digital, to get the colours you need. Otherwise, if it's like pens or paints, you'll either have to buy the specific colours or mix them yourself. Now, there are different types of flat to start with. You can start with dark tones, basically all the shadows and already put in place, or the mid tones, which is basically the general skin tones, the basic colours that you would use, or the highlight tones, the very lightest of the colours that you would be using, depending on how you prefer to work to build up your coloured image. Firstly, let me say, I tend to set my light source to the left and up. I don't know why, I just naturally do, but the light source can come from anywhere you want. You just have to be aware of the positioning when adding your highlights and shadows. If you're using pens or like Copics, it's best to start with the highlight colour, so everything is pale when you start, working down to the mid-tones, which will basically block out all of the colour you've already put in, mostly, and it will give you the general colour, all the way down to the darker tones of shadow. Other ways are the reverse, starting with the darker tones, as if you're starting in a dark room, and then slowly adding more light to the image. This can really only be done with paint and digital colouring though, as pens can't subtract from colour when added, only make them darker. The way I tend to do it is start with the mid-tones, and doing it in digital, I add the shadow and the highlights. The most basic I know of is cell shading, shading with hard cuts between tones, so you can really just see them, and they stand out. You'll see this in pretty much any anime, and only requires a basic knowledge of lighting. Well, until you want to make something more atmospheric in the lighting, that is. But the general idea is to know where the light hits, and what gets shaded and highlighted. The most common areas being on the neck, which is shaded by the chin, the hairline, which can be shaded by the fringe, and any clothing that hangs over or can cast a shadow through folds. Now we have a fully shadowed image. It's basic shading, of course, with solid blocks of shadow cast by something. But some shadows are simply cast by not being in the light source, like the sides of a building or the furthest side of a rounded object. Technically, rounded surfaces don't have sharp-edged shadows, so adding a little blur gives the appearance of a gradient, where the light simply tapers off into shadow as it cannot reach around. This also works with a secondary shadow source. I tend to do this quite quickly using a blurry brush or digital airbrush to add a quick dark gradient to one side of the image. But you can also apply this to the shadows themselves, making one side darker than the other, adding to the shadow effect. As I said, this is just a basic introduction. I'm sure you can find better resources for tutorials that delve into the basics of shadows and highlights and colour theory and how to use them correctly, as well as using multiple light sources, lighting for effect, coloured lighting, and more that would take many videos for me to explain myself. But here is a few extra tips, and just remember, with everything you do, it comes down to using your own judgment. Try not to use grey tones and multiply mode in digital colouring, with the exception of using it on other greys and whites, as grey is not the normal colour for shadows. Alter not only the lightness of the colour, but the saturation too. The more vibrant and lighter a colour, the more fitting it is for highlights, while a darker tone with less saturation can work good for shadows. With skin, you can also alter the hue of the colour to become a more red for shadows. Study the styles of artists you like. Study how their shading and highlights work. And with everything, it really does come down to the old faithful: practice, practice, practice. But as always, that's just my thought on the matter, and if you would like to leave your own thoughts, or perhaps if you have questions on this topic, or perhaps you just simply want to say anything like hi, or if you enjoyed this video, then comment below. Did you like how this was done? Was it simple or confusing? What other tutorials would you like to see from me? I'd like to hear from you. You can also find me on social media. All links are below in the description. You can also see this image on DeviantArt. If you liked the video, please leave a like by hitting the thumbs up, and if you would like to keep up to date on when I post a video, then feel free to hit that subscribe button. But for now, thank you for watching and enjoy your day.